Thanks for everybody for being here. One of the things that we wanted to do is just get a little bit closer with our partners, Dragon Faraday Racing and Artemis, and we wanted to talk a little bit about why we partner with these two wonderful teams. But most importantly, we want to talk about tonight just a few issues around risk, because risk is not only the core of our business as an insurer, and as a specialty insurer looking at very specific high-end risk issues and deciding which ones to insure and which ones to not, but also risk is a question every day for these guys in their businesses, and we wanted to talk about the points that are really relevant across not only the sports world but also the business world. So we're not going to be long. It's going to be entertaining, I assure you. You might be surprised, but we've had this discussion in Bermuda, so we do this pretty well, and we imposed on the Artemis team a couple months ago about the same process and had a very good entertaining hospitality with them as well. So with that, we're just going to kind of go through a couple questions on risk and for Loïc and Jay and Iain, and then we want to open it up for some Q&A, and as I said, it won't be that long. So again, thanks for joining us. So I'm going to look at my sheet because I have a crack team, and it makes sense to stay on target. So I'm going to start the first question for Jay. And in racing, whether Formula E or in, America's Cup, you can go next. What's the difference between managing risk and then taking chances?
Well, Gary, thanks so much for having us here. What a wonderful venue for this evening. I'd say to start, in racing, I think you really need to look at the opposite side of the coin from risk. And for us, that's reward. And I think if you eliminate too much risk in racing, I think you also eliminate the opportunity for reward. So for us, it's a really careful balance of looking at the opportunities for driving more risk, for letting these guys take more chances every weekend, closer to the wall, without too much that ends up, ending our day.
Like, maybe you want to respond to the wall comment first before we ask Iain about that?
It's just that the last few years that we've been racing, with Jérôme, my teammate, which is she's not here. It might come up later, but we had few times we were quite close, side by side, and for sure it's always a matter of taking risks, because you want to get the best out of it for the result, for the team, and for yourself. But at the end, also it's a team effort. So what's important is that both cars end up with the maximum points. And a few times it's been close, but I have to say that the championship itself was quite happy, and the people, the viewers, quite happy that the team let us race and being close. So far, it always end up in the right way. So I'm sure. We are both professional, and we race hard, but we race fair. But it's been a few times quite close.
Yeah, that's the best bit, I think, of the racing, that you guys can just go hard at each other. I love that about Formula E. I think the way I'd answer the question is, and I think it's the same in the insurance business, is that you're trying to model this trade-off between risk and reward that Jay talked about. And as a company or as a race team, the best you can do is predict that trade-off better than the others. It comes down to a lot of mathematics, boringly, and a lot of computer modeling. But ultimately, for us in a sailing boat, a risk might be that the boat goes out of control, isn't able to fly in a sufficient way because our boat's hydrofoil now. Or a risk that you make a mistake against your opponent in a one-on-one fight. But that can all be modeled and fight, and just like Argo, using smart technology and modern systems, you're able to predict in as accurate way as you can that risk, and that's the advantage that Argo take into their business model. And it's that brains and that ingenuity that get them to value that risk in a way that makes them money, that makes return for their partners, but equally for us, it's that measuring of that risk-reward equation that ultimately helps us win races.
One of the things that is different, we have just years and years of data on risk and insurance, and we base our decisions upon that. You and Loïc and Jérôme have risks that emerge during your sport in the middle of the competition. What are your answers, and what are some of those things that emerge, and how do you take care of those?
Well, the first thing I'd say is if they emerge, you haven't predicted them accurately. So, for us, performance prediction, as we call it, is the biggest part of our game, in just the same way it is for you. You're trying to predict the future. from past data, for sure, from modelling the interaction between, in our case, all the physical forces. For you, it would be looking at society and making decisions. But it is exactly that. It's prediction. So yeah, you have data, we have past data, but you're predicting the future to value risk in sport, to value risk in valuing the price of insurance. But the game is equally interesting. I mean, people don't think insurance is interesting, Gary, but the truth of it is, it's a difficult problem to solve, and that's fires anyone up, I think, who has that same kind of viewpoint on solving problems.
Great. Jérôme, you want to come over here and answer this?
He's arrived.
Exactly.
This is Jérôme D'Ambrosio. Welcome.
Apologies for the delay. I discovered New York traffic yesterday. Get familiar.
Spoken like a true Belgian.
But you have some risks that come up during the race. What do you do to negate those?
Well, I think risk, when you speak about racing, motorsport, to me there's two types of risk. The first one that comes to people's mind is obviously the risk that you take as an individual in the car. And I wouldn't say that's risk management, because that's a decision you have to make very early on in your career. You accept those risks and you're willing to take them. And if that's the case, then you just move on from it. But then you've got the risk on the track during the weekend, and that's very interesting for us because it's all about risk versus reward, and when you want to take those risks to make sure that you get a reward, and when you want to actually, like for example in qualifying, and when you actually want to take a step back, take less risk because you want to set up the car and you want to make sure that that's the most important thing. So the level of risk you take when you take a corner or that you decide to take for a lap really depends on what phase of the weekend you're at, and then what phase of the race, what position you're in. So it's something actually that you consistently evaluate throughout the race, throughout the weekend, and based on a particular situation, then you decide, okay, I'm willing to take X amount of risk because the reward is going to be a possible reward behind it, or no, it's more important that I stay on track to get some more information or something like that. So it's actually a big part of our job.
Good. So, running Argo is a business. Jay, you run a business. When a few years ago, you signed an agreement to be one of the Formula E teams. Was that a risky decision to be one of the teams in an emerging sport?
Certainly sitting here today doesn't feel like it, right? Looking back almost 3.5 years ago, there were 2 teams that had signed up ahead of us. But what you saw was not just another sporting league. I think we see across the world there's so many new sporting events that we're constantly bombarded by. But I think that what intrigued me most, Gary, was that this was about doing something beyond sport. This was about introducing electric vehicles to some of the most prominent cities in the world, showing off that these things are as fast as anything that you can drive. It's as interesting, and that aspiration of being something more than just another form of sport, I think captured my interest. And I think the risk reward here, going back to the earlier point, is that these franchises may be some of the most valuable franchises in the world in terms of motorsport. And I think our hope is that with events like this here in New York, not too far where I grew up, this is an opportunity for the city just to show its focus on innovation, on green technology, and just an incredible moment for New York City.
Yeah, Loïc and I were talking about a little bit, me having grown up here too, just the thought of having this race here is an amazing, never thought that would be pulled off. But so, risk is an important topic, but we all like to push, and a lot of people are competitors. I mean, Loïc, you have to push out of the comfort zone too. How do you know when to do that during the race, and when's it appropriate to do that?
It's always a matter of feeling and experience, like Jérôme mentioned earlier on. I mean, at the end, it always depends, you always have to take the positive or the negative out of a risk, Am I going to take this risk? What can I get from it? If it's positive or not for the whole team. So it's always difficult, but it's a matter of how do you feel with the car, where you are in which situation, at what point in the race, and what you can get out of it, If you can get a victory out of a nice move, for example, you might take the risk because, a victory is something really special. If it's for 1 point and you know that the risk it's quite high, it might be better to stay where you are, or if it's with your teammate, sometimes who may stay behind or not to try to overtake, you know. So it's always something, you know, it's always a matter of the situation, you know, as you say, you have to take a decision at one point. Does it make sense to take that risk or not?
Iain, I think that, you know, we've talked a lot. You're really proud of Artemis's run through the America's Cup to the Challenger playoff finals and all that. Yet you look back and an umpire boat, running over an umpire boat, practice boat collapsing in on itself and all those things. You guys pushed an envelope as well, as Loïc's talking. How far and what decisions did you make to push and pull back as far as the success of the team?
I was thinking then about one of the differences in sport compared to the insurance businesses. As you get further, if you got further behind, you actually push harder in sport. I mean, you've got nothing to lose. Whereas, of course, in the I was just thinking as I sat there thinking, how does that work?
When the stock's down, that's when we're
exactly.
going to go.
So that's an interesting one, but it's absolutely right. In sport, as you said, there's times where you're going for the win or you've got nothing to lose, where you push a lot harder. Yeah, for us, we have the America's Cup's a competition held over about 3 years, a sailing competition, quite open design, and you have a lot of crossroads along the way on the decisions that you make. But again, I come back to what I said before, that you are trying to predict. It's a case of using models to try and predict which way you go, and you have to return to those models. If you're doing it on opinion, as we do in our 100-man team quite often, you end up having a lot of discussion, a lot of argument. You need to have a central kind of tool set, a chain of mathematics that you have faith in. And that comes back to decisions like a boat breaking in half for us was a safety factor decision early on, a wrong one, and your decisions are often that, an inaccurate prediction. But the beauty of the world is we can't predict it. We have no chance to predict it. There's way too many variables, so it still requires a few artists along the way to come up with the ideas to be tested by those computers.
Jérôme, we've got 1,400 people at Argo thinking about risks, like Iain said, to make sure we don't have any boat crashes or anything like that. But you often talk about how the team is very important. What are some of the most important factors that the team's feeding you during the race that help you decide on where to go and when to back off?
Well, obviously, you know, people see racing as you only see the driver in the car, and so it's difficult to see all the people behind. There's actually a huge amount of work in the background. It's probably the biggest team sport in the world. The amount of people that are actually behind us being in the car is huge. And if one of these guys is not doing the job properly, or a driver makes a mistake, or someone along the chain makes a mistake, you don't get the results. So yeah, it is a team sport. When we're in the car, there's obviously a lot of the information are given from the dash, but again, there is developed with your engineers and so on and so on. So it's all the work in the background done from the team that helps you manage that properly. And then I'm in constant communication here with Jay throughout the race. So I feed him my energy numbers all the time. And for us, it's difficult from the car to make a decision based on for the strategies. So we don't have the whole picture. Jay has it. So Jay will be the one, calling me in and say, okay, we picked this lap because this or this is happening. We always have a preferred strategy, but obviously you take a decision based on the information, and the information changes constantly during the race, and so we constantly find ourselves having to change strategy. And Jay's the guy actually making the last call based on all the information that he has. And so it is very much a team sport. I need the team to support me when I'm out there, giving me the energy numbers of the other guys, letting me know what type of strategy we're on, and so on and so on. I mean, we had a bit of bad luck this year in Mexico. But for example, that was, I was in the car and the team called a great strategy. Should have allowed us to be on in the top 3. Okay, something happened, we got a bit unlucky. But these things it's not me in the car. It's the team behind. So yeah, it's crucial.
Jay, and then I'll ask Iain the same question. We're looking at risks that are emerging, like cyber insurance and the issues with risks, which your companies and this team have to look at as well, just from the standpoint of having their kind of front line impeded by somebody trying to create a problem. Your sport brings new innovations with it too. What are some of the risks you've seen show up because of the innovation in the sport?
It's a great question. I think the biggest emerging threat in motorsports, as well as opportunity, frankly, is software. And I think we're seeing it everywhere. We're hearing about it with the world of connected things, where at any moment software can change, it can be hacked. And I think in racing it's a little different, where the same thing that can prevent a little wheel slippage that helps you go through a corner at a 1/10 of a second or a 100th of a second faster can also be a software with one bad line of code that can end your race, that can stop your car on track. And so I think the emergence of better and better software, the continued investment in software, we see it at PMC, at Penske Media every day, where we're tracking 170 million users, all of their data. We have something on the order of magnitude of 100 threats a day that are coming across our various media properties. And so this investment in software, in protecting data, very much as you guys do for so many businesses around the world, is front and center for us in both sports and media.
Great. Iain, same thing about the emerging, obviously America's Cup as well, is why we partner with both you guys. Emerging technologies and innovation are the key part of success, but it creates some other risk.
I mean, the innovation itself always comes with a risk. I mean, it's the classic would be a boat breaking in half. You push things to the limits, and I have this saying within our team that sometimes the drivers can complain when something goes wrong on the boat or the car. And I try and point out to them that the person behind that issue, the electrician or the software writer, is pushing their limits as well. And they take a risk on every day, and mistakes can be made. But again, so in the way that a business or a team globally can have a risk, so can every single individual within each company or with each team as they make their day-to-day decision. They're all at the cutting edge. That's modern sport, technology, business. People are all trying their best. So it's always a daily risk-reward question.
Great. Maybe we'll wrap up and then just turn over to Nicki for some questions, with 2 questions for the drivers. We've got a new track, a first-time track here in Loïc. You've probably walked it, you've been out on it, you've seen it. What do you think are the biggest opportunities and the biggest risk here in New York on the track?
A few things. I mean, the surface is not as flat as the last few racetracks where we've been. So for sure, in terms of stability, it's going to be something which is different, and in terms of setup, also compared to what we had in the last few races. The track is really tight, really narrow. So it's going to be difficult, to push the limits because the walls are quite close to the race cars for sure, and also in terms of battles, in the race it's gonna be tough to defend and to overtake. So for sure, qualifying is gonna be something really, really important. Technically, it's gonna be a difficult one, but then there is all the positive about it. Being here in New York, the first race car championship, which is gonna be able to race here in New York. The location is great, and hopefully we're going to have a lot of people coming to enjoy it.
Same thing. What do you think the biggest risks are with this track?
Well, I think just to add to what Loïc said, I think he said it all. It's bumpy, it's narrow, it's tricky, it's everything.
New York traffic.
And New York traffic. So it's hopefully not.
It's going to be on time for the race. I can guarantee that.
We want to be ahead, so we're not in traffic. But no, I think that the important, what Loïc said is true. What I would add is that makes up for a good show. And so when things get really tough for us in the car, it means that we make, hopefully not us, but people get to make mistakes. And that means that the fans like the race, they get a good race, and that's what we want to show in New York. We want to show that we're an entertaining series. I'm sure fans will like it, and so I think it's a good thing for us that it's actually not that smooth, and for the championship it's going to produce something nice.
Great, so I'll hand this back over to Nicki, and we'll see any other questions, and with everybody here.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I've just got to add, actually, now I am the pit lane reporter for Formula E, which is obviously not as risky as driving at 150 miles an hour down a tight, twisty street circuit, but try interviewing a driver after a bad race. That is risky. Yeah, questions from the audience.
This is actually a question for you. Excuse me. When you're dealing with insurance, as far as the differentiation between insuring a race car driver and, say, the boat and the sailboat, is there a difference? How do you factor in how you do the levels of insurance based upon the race cars compared to on the water?
Yeah, we don't want to touch either. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, it's a lot of factors. In fact, we have our chief actuary here who's in the room. It's the beauty of insurance is it's simply a math game. And it's a matter of what people are willing to pay for the risk that we feel we can make the return on that would be viable to us from a business standpoint. The things, Artemis can't run their team without insurance. Jay can't run his businesses without insurance. The funny thing is, I agree with Iain, no one goes to college and thinks, okay, there are some people, but most people don't go for insurance. But the funny thing is, commerce can't really turn without it. And so those two risks are two perfect examples. They're very specialized risks. So the challenge in these sports, think about workers' comp insurance, where there's just millions and millions of reams of data. There's not a lot of experience in these sports for an insurance company to look at. So you're placing a bigger bet, but you also charge plenty of money for the bet too. It's a simple matter of sliding the scale and going. Was that good enough, Bob? Exactly. So exactly.
Actuation 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
David Rose, Accent Magazine and Rewind Magazine. I don't know much about sailing, but I know in motorsport, strategy is a very important component to the end result. And with Formula E, passing under braking 3 abreast is something that's quite normal and expected. Here in Brooklyn, it's very, very tight. And what kind of strategy do you talk, as far as self-preservation and through the corners and at the start and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think the best way is to start from the front is the best strategy. But I think here in New York, I think there's going to be two things. You can control some risks here and some parts of the strategy. Those are the preparation, everything we've done up to this event. We've tested twice between the last race and here. We really worked on the car setup. So I think there's the preparation side, which you really can control. The stuff that you can't control, frankly, certainly here in New York, the weather. And then the other thing will be once these guys sometimes put down their lids and they go racing, things happen. But we've hired, I think, 2 of the best pilots in the world. Both are some of the smartest, most intelligent drivers on the circuit. So, a lot of the computer and a lot of the mathematics that are happening are inside their heads. And so we expect a very good finish here this weekend at our home race.
Thank you. Now, we need to allow a little bit of time for you to all enjoy the view and have some drinks. So I'll just take one final question if there is one, but I know the guys are going to be hanging around if you want to ask anything further this evening.
Christine from Accent and Rewind. I'm just wondering, how much control do you have in the cockpit of the aerodynamics of the car? Are you able to change the wing angles or?
Yeah, for sure. Basically the car itself, the aerodynamics, the monocoque, and the suspensions and stuff, they are all the same for all of us. The powertrain is different, but yeah, you definitely can do a lot of setup changes, with springs, dampers, aerodynamics and stuff, tire pressure. There's a lot of opportunities to set up the car and to do different stuff compared to the other teams.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Just before I give a big round of applause and thank our panelists, I just want to remind everyone to collect your goodie bag at the end. And I have been assured that there is a dark silhouette on the front of this, and it is indeed Iain. I'm not quite sure what he's doing or what's in the box, but you can find out if you pick up your goodie bag.
Yes, and Argo does have the best gift bags anywhere. I've been to a lot of races. These guys do it right. So make sure you take that.
I have a very good team.
Huge round of applause. Thank you very, very much.